People of Reddit, what historical fact have you learned that ruined everything you thought you knew about this life? Let's hop in. Story 1. Ancient Antarctica was actually a rainforest, a lush and verdant paradise filled with flora and fauna. Despite the interesting fact that there was a whole continent of animals who lived on this planet that we'll never know about, as their remains are locked beneath miles of ice, it blew my mind that Antarctica only fully froze over about 35 million years ago, despite breaking from its supercontinent 180 million years ago. That means Antarctica supported independent life for around 145 million years, which ruined any sense I have for time and perspective. We really are just specks on this planet. Story 2. There was graffiti that got preserved in Pompeii and Herculaneum. Because they didn't have paper, public announcements were directly painted on the walls. Some of the graffiti is on par with what you'd expect to find on the wall of a trucker's stop. I screwed the barmaid. Felix screws like a god. Take off your clothes and show us your hairy arse. Stuff like that. One of my favorites was a big stone with runes carved in it. People thought it was holy or something. It was eventually translated, and it said something like the ancient equivalent of, Sven was able to lift this because he's an absolute unit. Story 3. In European churches, statues were painted in flashy colors. The ones outside got bleached by the sun, but there are still some inside that have their color. By today's standard, it would have been considered tacky and of bad taste. Also, churches in the High Middle Ages were really into clockwork. Some of these places probably looked less like the austere places of worship and more like Chuck E. Cheese when everything was running. Story 4. There's a Spanish explorer that first visited the Inca Empire and saw lots of prosperous cities and a great civilization, and who told his peers about it when he returned home. But when other folk went to visit, they said they found nothing but jungle and thought the explorer lied about his story. The fact that blew my mind is that nowadays we're discovering that his story was true, and the people he encountered died from diseases brought into the New World, and the cities and civilizations they built were consumed by jungle in the span of just a few years. Makes sense. I mean, look at what we're finding with LiDAR now. Whole cities covered by overgrowth to the point you can't even see them anymore. Mowing the yard in those places back in the day must have been a hell of a job. Story 5. Not a life ruiner, but lighters predate strike matches by a couple centuries. They originate from repurposed flintlock pistols that ignited tinder shoved into the barrel that were set aflame by the trigger mechanism. Story 6. It blows my mind that there was an entire species of pigeons, the passenger pigeon, that American settlers managed to hunt to extinction. In 1850, the passenger pigeon was the most abundant bird in North America, and possibly the world, with single flocks that numbered in the millions. By 1914, the last living passenger pigeon died. We wiped out hundreds of millions of birds in less than 65 years. There were so many of them, their flocks would sometimes take hours to pass overhead, according to some reports. Throughout the 19th century, witnesses had described similar sightings of pigeon migrations, how they took hours to pass over a single spot, darkening the firmament and rendering normal conversation inaudible. There's a written account from a member of the Pokagon tribe who remembered how a traveling flock arriving in a deep valley would pour its living mass hundreds of feet into a downward plunge. I have stood by the grandest waterfall in America. Yet never have my astonishment, wonder, and admiration been so stirred as when I have witnessed these birds drop from their course like meteors from heaven. And then they were just gone. Story 7. Victorian-era London was a terrible place to be alive as a member of the working class. If I recall correctly, you could pay a penny to sit indoors on a bench, but no sleeping, 2 pennies, and you could swing your arms over a rope and sleep standing up. Or, if you made hella money that day, you could pay 4 pennies and sleep in a coffin. The water was undrinkable, and the children were expected to work hours between 12 and 18 a day, starting at 4 years old. By those standards, a lot of us would look like royalty to them. Story 7. The real reason chainsaws were invented. F*** that. Before C-sections, if a baby was too large to pass through the birth canal, parts of the pelvis would be removed to widen it. At first, the procedure was performed with a small knife, which was very messy and painful. But in 1780, 2 doctors invented the chainsaw to make the removal both easier and less time-consuming. The original chainsaws were powered by a hand crank, and here's a picture of one. Story 9. If the entirety of human history was condensed into a 500-page book, modern anatomical humans wouldn't show up until page 450, and Homo sapiens wouldn't build empires until page 490. The atomic bomb and the foundation of Rome would be on the final page together and only a paragraph apart. And yet, in all of this, the vast amount of technological advancements from the discovery of the atom to the modern day would fit in the last few sentences of the last paragraph of the last page. And people wonder why we're reckless. We're still effectively great apes, but with shiny toys. This is also one of the theories for not being able to find intelligent extraterrestrial life thus far. We've only been able to send communications out of Earth for like the smallest blip in human history. We may nuke ourselves out of existence within 100 years of inventing nukes. And if every civilization did that, it would be really, really hard to find one that is in the sweet spot of communicating and having not blown themselves up already. Story 10. When I learned that NASA had discovered over 100 billion galaxies, and seeing the image to put into perspective that our entire solar system is only about the size of a coin compared to our galaxy, which in relation to other galaxies would only be about the size of a single US state. We are so incredibly small within this universe. Here's a photo of just a snippet of the various galaxies that NASA found from their official site, keeping in mind we haven't even ventured outside our solar system, which is within our Milky Way galaxy, just a grain of sand in the context of the universe. Wow. I've definitely seen that image before, but whenever I see it again, it's always just kind of a re-jolt of how insignificant we all really are on the grand scheme of things. That's crazy. But on that note, we are going to hop into the rapid fire segment now for stories too short to make a full entry out of, but too good to be left out. Let's jump right in. It says here in this history book that luckily the good guys have won every single time. What are the odds? Old Norse runes were found carved up like 20 feet on a cave wall. When they were translated, they just said something like, "This is very high." God, I love people. There's graffiti from the workers inside and on one of the pyramids of simple stuff like, "We ate onions and beer today." That Napoleon wasn't cartoonishly short. He was average for the time. All those cartoons were a lie. If you look at the history of mankind, you quickly see that nobody ever really learned from our history. We have no real idea what songs were played throughout most of human history. That Oxford University is older than the Aztec Empire. According to Live Science, the Aztec Empire flourished in the Valley of Mexico between 1325 and 1519 AD. And from Oxford University's website, the university has been around since 1096 AD. So, wow. 95% of native people before Columbus died of diseases brought by the explorers. That's 19 out of 20 people for 2 continents! The top spire of the Empire State Building was designed for docking blimps. So guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure to leave your story in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It does a ton to help me out. I'm ReddList. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you, beautiful people, next time.